Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. And when you were talking in Estonian, I was thinking, what is he possibly saying now? I mean, what is he like? Maybe does he make any specific point about what is coming up next and raising specific expectations? And can I really meet them? But then I thought, working in Brussels, it happens all the time that you hear people talking in some weird languages. In the end of the day, it turns out for the good, so no one really talks something bad. But it still is a bit funny, and I think this is partly the reason why people like me work in the European Commission, because it makes, in the end of the day, things a bit better. Still, one has to be patient. And in any case, you have introduced me. My name is Georgi. I work in the European Commission in the Directorate General for Education. So I'm not working mostly in the enterprise sector. However, we have a very strong experience in the business university cooperation. And before my commission life, I have been working only in private companies, one big telecommunication company and one software company before that, which eventually was bought. So I will try to make this as practical as possible. And I encourage also you to ask questions, because my experience is that as much as people try to make the European projects simple, still there are always some questions which remain, and so please I encourage you to ask questions. You have mentioned let's say the topic, which is the Knowledge Alliances. It's a brand new initiative which we launched 2 years ago as a pilot with some money which we received basically from the European Parliament, very, very limited budget, in order to experiment with university business cooperation beyond research and development. And this project has turned out to be, at least in the last 2 years, so successful that it eventually became part of the core program of the European Commission in education, which is the Erasmus+. It's basically the next 7 years. And I will talk about some of the experiences we had initially, and I will talk about something about the future of this specific instrument and try to address any practical questions. But before saying this, maybe just to give you an idea of the bigger picture as it is today. So what we have is a variety of different programs, and you can see them on the left side, which address essentially the different sectors of education. So we have, for instance, Grundtvig, Erasmus, Leonardo, and Comenius, which address cooperation in schools, in adult education, in higher education, etc. We have also another set of international programs, such as Erasmus Mundus or Tempus, for either third countries, which are, let's say, Americas and so on, or the countries around Europe. And this program is now turning into something much more straightforward. It is on the right side. This is the Erasmus program, and essentially it will focus on 3 main activities. The first is mobility, which most of you, I guess, know from the Erasmus program. This is by far the most prominent example of a European program in the higher education field. It is extremely successful, and it's turned 25 years now. We have 3 million people already there who have done it. The second very important part on which I will focus today is the cooperation for innovation. So this is something novel, because we have seen that it is not enough to support activities. It is better to support activities which produce results. So this is where the focus is going to, more on the results side and more on the best practices and innovation. And the third, and by comparison much, much minor and not so important part, is really the policy dialogue between the countries, which we also support in the European Commission. So for instance, whenever countries have very good and interesting examples to tell, we invite them and they tell these stories to others. So I have mentioned cooperation for innovation and best practices, and the idea here is that we essentially break the silos in the education cooperation. So we are encouraging businesses to cooperate actively with higher education institutions, and we are doing so because we think there is a lot of spillovers to be achieved. And we are supporting this with a variety of programs. We have also some instruments which are the strategic partnerships, as you can see them in the middle pillar. There we encourage more youth organizations, but essentially, if I would have to make it very simple, here the idea is that we ask the education sector to open up and to work with others, being businesses or NGOs or all kinds of organizations, because it is basically not enough to stay on your own. And this leads me basically to the topic of today, the Knowledge Alliances, which is addressing higher education institutions and companies. And Knowledge Alliances are transnational partnerships, meaning there should be more than one country involved. Secondly, they are structured partnerships, meaning that there should be either a legal entity behind it or a very structured organizational form, because we have so far seen that while consortia produce interesting results, the lifetime of the project basically ends whenever the money stops to flow. And when you incorporate this in some form or another, results are much more likely to first continue over the lifetime of the project, and secondly, to create a dynamic of its own, because when you run an organization or let's say an entity which you devote for running a specific activity, then you are addressing the issue in a much more structured way. So therefore, structured. Higher education businesses, basically these are the two absolutely important key players which need to be present in the instrument. And what I think is an interesting aspect to this is that knowledge alliances are essentially open to all kinds of disciplines. So it was mentioned we are not really talking here about product development or R&D, because for this there is another programs. In fact, we do not compete with R&D programs. They are much bigger and very, very, let's say, specific. Here we are talking about essentially the human capital element and, let's say, the intersections between businesses and universities where skills and capabilities are developed. Of course, this is particularly the case in emerging fields such as energy or ICT, but as I will show you a bit later, there is another set of examples in quite traditional fields. So really the essence is it's open to any kind of discipline. And it is very bottom-up, meaning that essentially it is based on a proposal from the prospective applicants. So it is in this sense dissimilar to European projects which tend to have very defined objectives. In this case, it is a little bit turning this upside down and saying, what is it exactly that you want to achieve? How would you like to monitor it? What would be the impact of what you want to do? And then basically sending it off to the process. Overall objective is basically to strengthen the capacity of European higher education and business organizations, and specifically to support innovation in higher education enterprises and more general. And specific goals are first to implement new ways of teaching and learning. Secondly, to stimulate entrepreneurial thinking, entrepreneurial education. in ways which are perhaps not so common today. And of course, a general objective, which is always something we have, is to facilitate the exchange of knowledge and best practices. Therefore, we have different countries and at least a couple of institutions which need to be part of the proposal. Okay, so what are the essential points here? The partnership needs to have at least 6 partners from 3 countries. And as you see, we need to have 2 businesses and 2 higher education institutions at least. We are looking for a balanced participation, and by balanced, I mean more or less equal. Because what happens often, especially from the education point of view, is that consortia tend to form around education institutions, and perhaps they have a consultancy being the business in the consortia. And this is what we would like to change towards a more equal representation of the business sector, therefore balanced. Secondly, let's say the innovation aspect is that we would like to see specific project activities going on. I can relate to some of those in the examples I am going to give. And we think that they should foster new skills for new needs. So therefore, often what we have currently in the Knowledge Alliance is in the field of emerging, let's say, new needs, either from businesses or from technological sectors. And an important aspect which we assign a lot of attention to is the issue of impact, meaning that even though the projects are very small comparison to others, we are very actively encouraging the monitoring of performance in order to improve from what the project participants are doing, and also to demonstrate the impact and the outreach which they have. So these are the essential features. So if we talk about more concretely what is it that the Knowledge Alliances are already doing, so I have to say we have had 3 in 2011, which we started with this pilot. Then we have had another 6, and we'll have an additional around 14 starting, so around about 20. So what we have there is, for instance, development of new learning and teaching methods. So to give you an example, we have one Knowledge Alliance, which is called No Fact, and it is addressing the field of advanced manufacturing. It is a joint venture between the Technical University of Darmstadt in Germany, Volvo, Festo, which is a large manufacturing company in Germany as well, university in Greece. Perhaps I forget some partners. In any way, these are the, let's say, some of the important partners. And what they do is they have this concept of the learning factory, where they actually have people, students, coming to the factory and running classes inside the factory. So whenever they learn about specific manufacturing processes, they can go and directly try this out at the field, basically. So these are the, if you like, kind of new methods for teaching that we are expecting. Another important aspect is the organization of continuing education programs. What happens is that companies are so busy that they have almost no time to expand their horizon. And of course, there is executive education market for these kind of things, but it's perhaps not always sufficient. So what we are trying to foster is basically encourage higher education to develop new offers for in-company education. Schemes of transversal skills, I mean entrepreneurial skills, communication skills, etc. And as I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship education in any kind of discipline. So from the creative industries, arts, down to manufacturing, which I mentioned earlier. Encouraging the embedding of activities in the study, so very practical, hands-on education, and strong involvement of company people as either teachers or, let's say, visiting professors. This is something which we are also encouraging, and of course exchange and mobility, which is, I would say, not so novel, perhaps. Okay, so initially, a few facts here. What we had was a pilot, basically, with very, very limited budget, 320,000 euros. We had an extreme amount of applications. I mean, I have personally so far not seen anything like this before. We have had, for the 3 proposals which were successful, I think around 100 proposals. We actually kind of had an internal competition process in our unit to see how many, I mean, we were trying to guess how many people would be applying, and no one really imagined this. So in the end of the day, we ended up with, I think, 99. It was just close to 100. But anyway, for us, this was the start, and essentially this is a signal of something which is, it's a signal for a demand, basically. And in the next round, we have had a slightly less active, let's say, participants rate, but it was still, I think, more than 65 proposals for what turned out to be 6 projects. And as I mentioned, based on these experiences, but also based on broad policy objectives, the Knowledge Alliances have now become a core, integral part of the program. And they are quite a significant one, as I will just show you in terms of numbers and figures. So also what will change is the scale and the size of a Knowledge Alliance. It will not be anymore a pilot of 18 months, what we had so far, but it will be between 24 and 36 months, and the budget will be between half and 1 million euro, which is a substantial increase as compared to what we had. So, a few examples about the fields, even though I'm not going to read this aloud, just to tell you, we have something which is happening in the field of cinema. We have another Knowledge Alliance active in the field of entrepreneurial education. Then, NoFact, which I mentioned, advanced manufacturing. Educate, which is, again, about developing entrepreneurs for the future. Then we have a specific project which is around energy saving in the paper and steel industry, and something related to energy efficiency as well. So as you see, extremely diverse spectrum, and this is what is making it very exciting as well. I have had an example here, but I don't think I'll present it now at large, because perhaps there would be some questions. I just want to show you what will happen next, because I think this will give you a frame, and this is what I will close with, more or less, about where we are going to, the future. So first of all, what the Commission has proposed is that we scale this activity and essentially develop it into a core activity for the next program. And this is what the Council and the European Parliament has agreed to do. So if nothing completely unexpected happens, this will be also the final result. I'm just saying nothing unexpected because Council and Parliament need to vote still, but this is essentially more a question now of a formal approval. So we will have a budget which will be around 170 million euros, maybe slightly less. What we have in terms of a quantitative target is that we are expecting up to 200 Knowledge Alliances by the year 2020. And we would like to actually, in the end of the day, have at least 10% of all European higher education institutions participate in a knowledge alliance or having participated in a knowledge alliance. And in terms of quality, we, of course, would like to see university business cooperation becoming a norm, not the exception, which I think in particular places is always the case, by the way. So what I'm trying to present here is not particularly innovative for a specific example, if you take it and extract. But let's say, speaking as a whole for Europe, it's certainly not the case. So our qualitative target is that this is really becoming a practice because of its importance for student needs and jobs and growth. And now the tricky part is how to basically apply and to of course prepare a proposal for this. Essentially, I have a couple of addresses here where you can look up the more detailed information. But perhaps now would be the time to address some more practical questions, some broad comments you may have, any remarks you have.
Okay, for those who watch us, the question was that why 6 partners? That in some very specific fields it would be extremely difficult to get a sufficient number of higher education institutions together.
Yes. Well, I first of all do agree with you that for a specific context, which operate in their own regional location or regional environment, perhaps this is destroying. But I would turn this into a complementary set of activities. So I would argue that in some cases, being rooted in the location itself is not sufficient. For instance, if you are enterprise which would like to export into a specific market, but then you need to develop specific skills for this kind of market, what you could do is essentially team up with someone from the country you would like to export with. So it really depends on your specific situation. I fully agree with you that for certain, perhaps individual situations, this is not appropriate. On the other hand, for, let's say, going abroad and developing either a market from the company point of view, or if you are an education institution, if you would like to, let's say, exchange best practices and learn from others, this might be the way to go. So, for instance, you might be not on the sending side, but on the recipient side. I don't know if that provides a bit of a... You mean the number, the pure number?
Pure number, because...
yes, okay.
We'll come back to example.
Sure.
We have 3 universities and 2 enterprises. And just to pick up additional enterprises in this particular project, it will be silly, honestly. Just to fulfill this number 6.
Okay, okay. Okay, I understand. So the question is really about the number and more. Well, I think that the mathematics is quite straightforward. It is based on the number 3, which is the countries, and then the business and university representation, because it's 2 organizations. So 2 times 3 would be actually 6. So this is the reason. Okay, I think that perhaps in some cases 5 is maybe better than 6, but still, if you would like to comply, I guess you could still find some partner that you would like to involve in your activity. But maybe I think your comment is actually relevant insofar that the rules of the game for this exercise are being rewritten constantly because it's a brand new instrument. So no one really knows exactly how this is going to work essentially out. And what you are now saying is interesting because it may turn out that we need to slightly decrease the number of institutions. in order to have, let's say, something which is more practical. But this is very much based on user feedback, such as yours. And I think thank you for the comment and the question.
My name is Natalia. I'm representing two companies. One is Estonian and the other one is Norwegian. And I have two peculiar questions. For example, if I participate in your program from Estonian side, I agree that I would look for 6 partners. Yep. Norway is out of European Union. Would it be possible for Norway to participate? Then I have another question. For doctorate programs, is there any rules? Because most students, they want to do doctor programs or master science programs. And not everybody would accept to be a researcher for such a long term. Yes. How would you comment on that, please?
Well, I mean, in terms of doctoral education, I would first of all say that if it is only about doctoral education, then we have the so-called Marie Curie industrial doctorates, which is essentially, it's a targeted instrument for PhD only, where we are supporting PhD students in becoming more, if you like, enterprise-oriented. So I would first of all check the objective very carefully if it's only about doctoral education. If let's say you would like to have doctoral education integrated in a larger activity, then perhaps the Knowledge Alliance might be a better instrument. But if you really have this narrow and clear-cut objective, I would like to develop more PhDs for XYZ sector, then I think there are other instruments as well, which you could consider. One of them being the European, the Marie Curie industrial doctorates. Okay. But I don't know if you have now really taken out the doctorates as just as an example, or
just an example, because nothing has been mentioned, and I'm
no,
not so much
it has not been mentioned. Also, just because the nature of the project is a bottom-up. So, as you have perhaps seen, it is quite general in terms of expectations, and also it is not related to bachelors or masters or PhDs in terms of level. What is much more important is the outcome, and secondly, the business representation in terms of either in-kind representation or really being active in this partnership. Because what we have is unfortunately very, very low business representation in university projects, exception being the R&D. Of course.
But this outcome, how would you calculate them based on what?
That's a very good question. It's a very tricky one as well.
Exactly.
First of all, we would calculate the outcome from a public policy point of view, meaning we would like to see, for instance, what is the outcome in terms of students who have run through these programs. So, for instance, how many students have been actually participating in this? Were there any degrees which come out of this? Are there any jobs created by these kind of activities? So these are more public policy performance indicators. What we would like to introduce with this program as well is that we encourage the participants to measure their own outcomes for themselves, because what we see in Europe...
With regard to the project.
Exactly. And we would like to encourage this to happen just before even the proposal, so that proposers think actively of what is it that they would like to have out of this. And in many cases, this will not be what we want, but often there is an intersection where the outcomes for the participants and, let's say, the broad objectives of the public policy interventions, but the reason why public money is spent. So there would be an intersection where those outcomes would be overlapping. So I think that, first of all, you would be expected to write what you want and what you expect to happen out of this project. And secondly, we are going to use, in the end of the day, after the fact and after the closing of the project, some broader KPIs, key performance indicators, in order to measure the overall effectiveness of this program.
Just the last question, very, very quickly. For the companies to participate in the program, do you need some revenues to be presented from the companies, or it's mostly how many research and development involved and produced, and how much intellectual property will be produced in the project? Okay. How will you see?
Okay, that's very also. So do you mean revenues in terms of financial?
First financial, yes.
Okay. Now, I think that once you apply for, because this is a grant, so being a grant, there is some requirements in terms of, let's say, the last year's turnover. But this is purely, I would say, a bureaucratic requirement. So it's nothing.
There is no minimum, actually.
No. So if you like, for the person who is going to read the proposal and evaluate the rationale and the business case, there is no need to present financial data. What needs to be presented is that this company has actually existed and has actually had some turnover. But these are two different processes. One is more on the accounting side, the other is more on the evaluation of the proposal. I think yeah, sure.
So, a little bit following the question of this nice lady. If we have, for example, partner not from the European Union, I understand Norway is so close to the European Union, in fact, that we can't say that it's a third party. But for example, if we have a partner from Ukraine or from Russia or from Turkey, how it can be involved or not?
Okay. The reason why Norway is part is because it's part of the lifelong learning program countries, of which Turkey is as well. Russia is not part of the lifelong learning program. I have to admit that I don't know the answer to your question. So, however, I'm sure that it does exist because Russia is part of the neighborhood policy countries. And what happens currently with the new program is that, okay, this is really now an interesting example, is that we are negotiating internally within the European Commission the applicability of each program to all these kind of countries. And as it happens, Russia, or Ukraine for this matter, are countries of the so-called neighborhood policy. And I have to say that I am not entirely sure if the neighborhood policy countries would fit into this program. However, I can check and come back to you to this, because it may well be that what is today not possible is possible from 2014 onwards. So I cannot tell you, unfortunately, for this. Yeah. No, but I can check this because I think it's a good question. And if you leave your card with me, I'm happy to give you the answer.
Okay. Urmas Varlane, Tartu University. I am asking about the Industry Academia partnership of Marie Curie.
Yes.
How it differs from your knowledge alliances. So, because I was once I had a program in Marie Curie Industry Academia Partnership. And in that case, it was very much, later it was very formalized. You had these forced secondments and all this stuff.
Yes.
How free is Knowledge Alliance now? Because it sounds now very free, but later there is a threat that finally there will be very tough rules which will eliminate a nice idea of really free in your thinking.
Yes. Okay. There are 2 points which I would like to make in regard to your question. The first question is that Marie Curie is really about R&D. So this is broader, and this will remain broader because this is the reason why this has been set up. The second question, to what extent this will be formalized in the future or become much more stringent? Well, I think that there is a trade-off to be made. Whenever you grow, you need to create scale. And if you have an instrument which is, let's say, not anymore addressing just a couple of pilots spread around Europe, then you will have to introduce a certain level of structure. Since we are now just preparing the next call, I can tell you that the next call will not be as formal, as you have just expressed your fear of. So the next call will keep this basic philosophy of being very bottom-up and open to different activities. It is not to be excluded that at some point we will have to, for instance, structure, and now I'm basically thinking a bit aloud, which I should not be doing, but that we may need to structure the objectives there. Because so far we have a very open set of objectives, which is very interesting for all kinds of demand, but it may be a little bit vague sometimes. And for instance, what I can see so far based on the first 2 rounds is that entrepreneurship education is really becoming something which stands out. Also, this example of in-company training, so where you take people to the either factory or whatever it is, enterprise. This is becoming also very, I mean, you can see it, that it is standing out. So I think perhaps some level of structure will be introduced as we go, but I don't expect that we are going to go too formal, not least because there will be one important player which will refuse to participate, and this is the business.
Okay, it's a very polite audience. I will ask a final question, which probably at least half of you are thinking in the audience. What kind of costs can I cover with this? Can I pay salaries? Can I pay for computers? Can I travel? What can I do with grant money?
Yeah, it's a great audience. It is essentially what you have already mentioned is covered by this. So it is essentially cost incurred by the activity, and what I would like to take out from this is the R&D part. So there would be, let's say, besides computers maybe, but there would be no cost reimbursement for infrastructure in terms of lab equipment or something like this.
But prototyping, can I do some 3D printing?
Yes. Yes, especially if you are able to prove in your proposal, because this is the essential stage, that there is a strong business case and there is a commercialization aspect to it. And travel, networking, perhaps also presenting your product at a venue or an event such as this. Knowledge sharing. Yes, perhaps some, to a certain extent, IT applications. For instance, if you have to have an app for your project, I mean, it's not expensive, but you could perhaps develop it as well, yes.